Now, the first section of the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to pray, we learn, helps us deal with God. The second section of the prayer helps us deal with the world. And in our broken world, how is it that we live? And how can we live with victory, not being defeated and not being broken by the broken world? And then we come to this part where Jesus tells us to pray, give us today our daily bread. Now, there's so many layers to this one. I mean, if you look at different commentaries and if you look at different experts on this prayer alone, there's so many directions that we can go. One of the directions is to think about our greatest need. Do you remember the story where Jesus is being tested by the evil one? Jesus had been fasting for 40 days, 40 nights, and he's in the wilderness. And the evil one comes up to him and says, hey, why don't you take all these round boulders? And if you go into the Judean wilderness, you'll see there's so many of these rounded boulders. They look like little loaves of bread. And the devil says, hey, why don't you just switch these out, snap your fingers, because we know who you really are, and you could turn these stones into loaves of bread. I mean, you're hungry. You remember what Jesus says? He quotes Deuteronomy. He says, well, man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the Father. Our greatest need isn't bread, even though we need it. Our greatest need as Christians is God's word. It is God's word that creates. It is God's word that leads us and guides us. It is God's word that leads us to the Father. So what is our greatest need? Well, that we're in fellowship, that we're in communication with God. Are you in God's word? If our greatest need is God's direction and God's word, well, then the prayer can be, Lord, help me with your word. Help me to steep my life in your word. Help me to feed on your word. Help me to ingest your word. But alongside of this prayer helping us understand of how deeply we need to feed on God's word and how grateful we should be for it, it's also a prayer to help us pray for what we need. For many of us who live in this rich part of the world in North America, we have way more than we need. And so this prayer can be turned into a prayer of gratitude. Lord, thank you for so much. But for so many of our brothers and sisters and so many of the people in the world, they don't even have enough rice or bread to get them through the day. And so that becomes our prayer. Ultimately, it's a reminder that every good and perfect gift, every single gift comes from God. And we can be grateful to him. That we can thank him not only for his word, but for all the needs he meets in our lives and all the ways he's been gracious to us in our provision. Lord, give us this day our daily bread. If you'd like to learn more about Mission Hills Community Church or visit us on a Sunday morning, please check us out at www.missionhillscrc.ca. And thanks for watching.